Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jason. I've been working on the 6.0 CUCV. I had a couple people ask me, how did I do my wiring? Because I have mine wired to energize the PCM, to energize the fuel pump, and all of it works off the factory ignition switch. So it literally, you turn the key and start the truck just like you would brand new from the factory. You can't even tell that I've changed the engine, the computer, the whole deal. So I'm gonna do my best to show you how I did that. So if you want to copy it, you can do the same thing. All right, so the first thing I'll show you right here is your factory. Some people call it a bulkhead, some people call it a junction, but it's where your wires come through the firewall from the factory. Now, the main portion of the plug here on the left, this is all of your engine compartment wiring. So your windshield wipers, sensors that go to the engine, power feeds for the engine and the interior. This is like your main panel. Your second little piece that goes right here is for the front half of the truck's headlights and marker lights and everything else. And then this far right section goes to the tail lights in the back. You can do this without either of the lighting sections. You don't need them in order to make your engine run, start, do what it's supposed to do. All right, so the way you get started on this, there's a couple wires that you'll need to identify right out of the gate. Most square bodies that I've worked on, not all, but most of the ones I've worked with, they'll have three large red wires coming into this connector, and they almost always have a fusible link on them. You can identify it by a little black plastic piece that's molded onto the wire, and then the wire changes diameter and it'll feel different, and that's the fusible link. They're usually connected to the distribution block on the firewall right up here. But sometimes they're connected elsewhere in the engine bay, especially on the 6.2 diesel trucks. I've seen them connected to a hot post on the glow plug module resistors. Now, these three need to get 12-volt battery power. So anytime the battery is connected, these need to have 12-volt power coming to them. Now, after that, you're going to need to be able to energize your starter. And GM still does their starters the way now that they've been doing for the last 30 years. GM typically runs the power wire from the battery positive terminal directly down to the main power post on the starter. Then they bring power from there up to the fuse block, other places, things like that. And then they have a separate post on the starter that is the exciter terminal. So you can see here on my starter, this is just the stock 6-liter starter. This is my main power post. My battery power connects to here. Because of my setup, I only have the main power for the starter connected to here. I took my power for the rest of the truck off a separate terminal on the battery post. And then the small post right here is your exciter. So this is the post that when you apply 12 volts, it engages the solenoid, makes contact, spins the starter, and engages the tooth with the ring gear on the flywheel or flex plate. So you're going to need to get from your key the start signal, the starter exciter signal needs to still be connected to this terminal on the starter. So on my truck, and again, this is an 86 CUCV, coming out of the connector here, it's a large diameter purple wire. Now, it really doesn't need to be that large a diameter, but I just matched it. So I butt connected into that purple wire. I ran a much longer red wire. Like I said, it's the same gauge and diameter as the factory. And this goes all the way over and connects onto that exciter terminal on my starter. That way, when I turn the key to start, it energizes, spins the starter just like it would in a factory setup. So now that you've got your starter exciter connected, the next thing you need is fuel. You need to energize your fuel pump. And your fuel pump needs to be energized when the key is turned on to the run position, and it needs to stay energized when you're cranking the engine. depending on which source you pull from, there are run powered but not start powered wires. So you need to make sure you get one that is powered both in the run position and in the start position of the key. On my truck, it was this pink with black tracer wire. And the gauge of this wire is more than sufficient to supply the amount of power to my fuel pump. It already has a 15 amp fuse inside on the factory fuse panel. So I just connected this wire to the power supply, the positive wire of my fuel pump, and then connected the fuel pump ground to the frame. So when I turn the key to run, it energizes the fuel pump, it pumps fuel. Now this is going to cause my fuel pump to run all the time, but I'm running a return style system and the pressure regulator is at the fuel rails on the engine. So I don't foresee this being a problem. This truck really shouldn't do much extended idling. If it's running, it'll probably be driving usually under heavy throttle. So I shouldn't have any issues. So now you've got starter energized to get your starter to spin the engine. You've got fuel pump energized to turn your fuel pump on to pump fuel up to the engine. The next thing you need to do is provide the correct powers to your PCM. And the P01 PCM, it's pretty easy to identify. The pink wires require switched power. The orange wires require constant power. So your orange wires need to be connected to a battery positive source so they get 12 volt power all the time when the battery is connected. I installed this aftermarket fuse and relay panel. My bottom 20 amp fuse here supplies electricity for my constant powers to the PCM. It's only a few small gauge wires, 20 amps. I should actually probably put a smaller fuse in there because I think it only draws like 4 or 5 amps max. So I'll put a smaller fuse just to make sure that's protected, but that's what this fuse down here is for. Now your switched powers, those are your fuel injectors, your memory and your power up circuit in the PCM itself, and a few other little odds and ends. Those draw enough current that they need to be run through a relay. So what I did is I ran 2 fuel injectors per 20 amp fuse. So injectors 1 and 3, 2 and 4, 5 and 7, and 6 and 8. They each have their own fuse. Now I put the power supply to these on 2 separate relays. Okay, so these 2 relays right here are wired up that when the signal activates them, they provide battery voltage to my fuel injector circuits. My third relay over here powers my 5th 20 amp fuse, which is my switched power to the PCM. So the same time these 2 relays activate, this one does as well, provides 12 volt power to the PCM. Switched 12 volt switched power to the PCM. Now, all 3 of these relays are activated off of the key switch again. And on my truck, I found that by testing. I pulled all the wires that I didn't know what they came off of. A bunch of them were already cut when I got the truck. The guy that owned it before me had done some of his own electrical work. I didn't need any of it, so I got rid of it. So I used my multimeter, tested the wire I ran for my fuel pump, this large diameter pink wire, and this brown wire also. Now the 2 pink ones are energized when the key is in run and when the key is in start. That's important because if you're cranking in the start position, but your fuel injectors aren't powered up, they're not able to function, your thing's not going to start. So you need to make sure that whatever control circuit you're using for your relays, you need to make sure that it's energized when the key is in start and run, not just run. And like I said, on this truck, it's an 86 CUCV. It was a large diameter pink wire. This one also has its own fuse on the fuse panel in there. It's a 20 amp fuse, which should be sufficient for what I'm doing with it. It just runs right out. I ran it up behind, and it connects to the control circuit on the relays. So post 85 on the relays comes connected to this pink, and then post 86 connected to ground. Okay, so once you've done that, that's pretty much it. As long as you've wired everything correctly, when you turn your key to the run position, your fuel pump should come on as it's connected. Your relays should all make contact and activate or provide power to the switched sources in your PCM and in your fuel injectors. And then when you crank, they should stay energized. The starter should engage and it should start. That's pretty much it. Hopefully I didn't ramble. Hopefully it makes sense that you can duplicate, or at least you know what to look for in your vehicle and where to connect and what to do with it. So I think that's it for this one, guys. Just trying to answer questions and help people out. Thanks a lot for watching. If you found it helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you have any other questions, write them in the comments below and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. Thanks a lot. We'll see you soon.